Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 49. We are covering Zebediah Killgrave, the Purple Man, as requested by our patron Ruby. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody that you can find us on a variety of platforms, and our newest platform is Podcoin. If you check out podcoin.com, you can find out all about the app that pays you to listen to podcasts, which if you're hearing this right now, you're already doing, so why not do some good with it? You earn Podcoins, which you can then transfer to gift cards for yourself, or you can donate them to charity. And right now, Capes on the Couch is a bonus podcast on Podcoin, which means you earn 1.5 times the usual amount of Podcoins just for listening. And if you're not signed up for Podcoin already, when you sign up, if you insert the bonus promo code CAPES, you'll earn some additional free Podcoins. So check it out. It's a fun and new way to learn about podcasts, get some new fresh podcasts. And also, as I said, you can earn yourself maybe a little extra scuttle or put it towards helping out a number of excellent charities. So want to just preface our episode with saying that, and reminder that next week's episode is our mailbag. It's our 50th episode. So
Yay!
we're going to be
I do that every time. This is the first time though where I caught him off guard.
It's just the way you said the yay.
I know.
Man, that's good.
Sorry.
You threw me off.
I know I did.
You completely threw me off. So our next episode is our mailbag, and we are going to be opening it up to questions from you. So if you have a question about a character that we have or haven't covered, please feel free to send us an email at capesonthecouch@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. So please get those questions in before our 50th episode. It's 50 episodes, like Jesus. That's a lot, man.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And if you think about it, I mean, we literally have a master list of characters to pull from. There are still some really, really big names of folks that we have not gotten into.
Yep.
So we have really scratched the surface, and thankfully our patrons have come up with some fantastic solutions and suggestions for characters that we should do, like this one, Zebediah Killgrave, the Purple Man. So let's get right into it. Zebediah Killgrave was created by the great late Stan Lee and Joe Orlando in Daredevil number 4 from October of 1964. A former doctor who was then operating as a spy. He was in an accident with a chemical that turned his skin purple and gave his body the ability to exude pheromones that allowed him to control people nearby with his voice.
With the chemicals again?
Apparently it was a nerve gas. Yeah, everybody gets hit with a chemical accident, and apparently this one was like the Joker in that it impacted him and turned his skin a different color. Just happened to be purple, not white or green.
Once again, I hope people don't need this warning, but life doesn't work this way. If you get exposed to chemicals and you don't know what they do, please go to the emergency room or urgent care center. I beg of you.
Yeah. Call the poison control hotline, call a medical professional, get treated. You're not going to get superpowers. Side note, a friend of mine was undergoing treatment for thyroid, and she had to take some radioactive iodine. And I told her, if you start turning green when you get pissed off, or if you start shooting webs, your ass better call me immediately. I'm just throwing it out there. She said nothing has happened yet, so we'll see. But in any case, so Killgrave, the Purple Man, was initially a recurring villain of Daredevil. And later on, we find out that he seduced and impregnated a woman who gave birth to a daughter, Kara. And she initially was known as Purple Girl or Purple Woman. And then she became known as Persuasion. And she was affiliated with Alpha Flight. So she has a lot of his powers. And then he became involved with Jessica Jones, which I'm sure is where the vast majority of our audience knows him from, as the Netflix show, which is currently in, or just released season 3. I've watched the first episode and a half. I have a baby, so it's kind of difficult to watch things in the binge format that we used to watch them to, because now we get things, if we can get an hour where we can watch television uninterrupted, that's cause for celebration. But in any case, so he became involved with Jessica Jones and he tortured her for months and he sent her off to kill Daredevil. And this traumatizes her so much that she leaves the superhero business and becomes a private investigator.
You can find out more about that with our Jessica Jones episode in our archives.
Yes, I think that was episode number 6, maybe.
Yeah, it was early on.
It was a very, very early epised. And for our patrons, we just released the uncensored version of that skit because that one had been sitting in the archives for a while. That was well before we had a Patreon. And I said, well, season 3 just came out. Let's throw the patrons a little nugget there. So Purple Man later manipulates the Thunderbolts and worked with Baron Zemo to control all of New York City because Purple Man's influence and sphere of control really just exhibits if you can hear him. That's right. About it. But he worked with Baron Zemo to create some devices that would drastically expand his powers and let him control more than just whoever was in his immediate vicinity. So during the Fear Itself storyline, he breaks out of the raft, but not before attacking the Puppet Master. And then it was later revealed that he impregnated several women who all gave birth to purple children, all of whom have their father's power, but only if they work together. So Daredevil ended up saving the children from their father, so they decide the best way to repay him is to collectively erase the world's memory of Matt Murdock as Daredevil because...
Wait. Matt Murdock is Daredevil? When were you going to tell me about this? Sorry.
So Killgrave had been building a machine to allow him to expand his powers, and the children decide that because Matt, who had been outed as Daredevil at this point, was so instrumental in freeing them from their father's control that they said, I know what we can do. Because again, these are kids between, I would say, maybe 7 and 12.
Right.
There's 5 of them. And to their credit, it's a wonderful thing to say, we're going to do a great thing. We're going to make sure that nobody knows that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. Except the problem is that Matt was in a relationship with a woman who was totally cool with everything. And it really just kind of messed things up for him. But
hey, that's why pencils have erasers, right? And people with superpowers have long-lasting, indelible consequences that are going to change the world as we know. Yeah, that really doesn't match up. Sorry.
No, it's a piss poor analogy. So he was recently killed by gunshot and his body thrown into the sun.
That's one of the most comic statements you could ever make.
Yes. Jessica really wanted to make sure that he was gone. So, I mean, this happened literally like within the span of the last couple months. So
I think she was mad.
Well, I think Carol was the one who threw him into the sun. Jessica is strong, but she's not that strong. Yeah. Carol can do that.
Yeah.
So if you want to find out more about Carol, we have a Carol Danvers episode that we released in conjunction with the Captain Marvel movie, which I bought on Blu-ray and haven't had a chance to watch yet. Again, I have a 3-month-old child, but I'm home now on paternity leave for the next 3 months. So I'm sure at some point I could scrape together sufficient time, maybe if he takes a nap longer than 40 minutes, but I digress.
Wait, then how are we doing this podcast? Do I need to call DIFUS on you? Well, no, they're not called DIFUS anymore. It's DCP&P, Division of Child Protection and Permanency. But anyway.
But that doesn't flow off the tongue like DIFUS.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And that's still a stupid name. It should be Child Protective Services like every other state. But anyway, sorry.
We digress about the bureaucracy in New Jersey, and let's move into the issues. And Amber had a couple of questions. The first one that she wanted answered was the relationship with his children, primarily his relationship with Kara versus his relationship with the Purple Children. And the Purple Children are really more of a recent thing. Kara's been a longstanding character. She's been around about 25, close to 30 years. The Purple Children really only just came out within the last year or so, and they're really just limited to the Daredevil run by Charles Soule. But if you can delve into a little bit more about his relationship with the kids.
Okay.
All of them collectively.
I understand. I may target Kara a little bit more, and I'm going to make an analogy that is going to get me in so much trouble, and yet I can't undo it now that it's in my head. So when a child goes down a path in their life and the decisions that they've made are not the ones that you expected, you have an obligation as a parent to continue to nurture what you consider to be positive about what's going on. What am I getting at with this? It could be as simple as a child has a different interest than you. You were an artist, they're a mathematician. So there are going to be times where they're doing things that you don't understand, and they're going to say the things that you do may not be as important to them. That's human nature. The Purple Man has certain abilities that he wants to use to control mankind. He has a daughter that is trying to be a hero. The journey that those two have been on has been tumultuous, to say the least. But what I'm about to say is where things get a little dicey. So I'm a father. I have a daughter. In general, I have been given advice that one of the main goals of any father with a daughter as they grow up is to have them avoid a certain lifestyle, profession, whatever you want to call it. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Keep them off the pole.
Exactly.
Chris Rock.
So, what am I getting at with bringing that up?
Aside from the fact that it demeans sex workers?
That's exactly my point. What if that's the scenario? What does that say about that person, and what does that say about me? The answer ultimately is it doesn't. It may have nothing to do with anything that I've done, and it may not be, quote unquote, the wrong thing for that particular person. I have my own values and things that I consider to be important, and for me to instill what I consider to be the things that are necessary for a positive life, that's what I need to focus on with my child, or what any parent needs to focus on with their children. The actual results and choices that an individual makes is still not up to the parent. And yet that is something that is incredibly hard to separate. It feels like a personal attack. You are less of a human being because you did not make a decision that I expected. When I say it that way, that sounds absurd, and yet that's exactly what we do, or what many people have done. It's not a guarantee that everybody reacts this way. So what about the parents that are on the other end of it? What about the child that is ashamed of what the parent has done in the past and says, I'm never going to be like you? That actually is a direct insult to the parent, and now the parent has to process that in a way that's going to allow for a change in the dynamic. You don't automatically have to say, well, you don't like me, so therefore I'm not going to like you, and I'm not going to continue to love you. You don't have to go that route. And once again, saying it out loud in those statements makes it sound a little more absurd. I'm doing all of this on purpose because with someone like Killgrave, you can read the comics, and that's what he does. He says, you are a disappointment. I can't stand this. So how's a person normally going to react to that? They're going to shun it anyway, which they may have done because development is always going to involve some level of rebellion. It may not be as outlandish as comic books, but still can happen and is very common. So I don't care if you're talking about little children that are learning to walk for the first time and their first steps are trying to go out of the front door. You have an obligation, of course, to protect little ones like that. You can physically hold them back. But you still have to acknowledge that at some point, as they get older, they're going to learn how to unlock the door. They're going to learn how to get outside. So now you have a choice. Do you say to them, I'm never going to let you outside because it makes me feel better and it makes me feel safe? Because he has these young children now that may not understand anything of what's going on, even with their powers, although at this point they're acknowledging them. Or do you try and take an even-handed approach that says, okay, fine, you can go outside, but you have to stay right here in the front yard, or I'm only letting you in the backyard, you can't open the gate, or, okay, at this point, I can see that you ride your bike, I'm going to let you ride down the block, or, all right, I know that you have friends across town now that you're in high school, I'll let you go there, but you have to call in and check with me every hour or so. Or, wow, I know you're in a relationship right now and you're in college and you're away from me and I actually have no control, and that's really disturbing. I'm actually having future flashbacks. Is there such a thing? Oh my God.
Flash forwards.
Flash forwards, yeah. Anyway, the point remains. Relationships like this are going to be dynamic. They're going to be incredibly time intensive and energy intensive. That's not going to change until the person becomes an adult and there is some level of separation. Until that time happens, do the best you can by what you do to demonstrate what is important to you. Because you can say plenty of things, but your actions usually are going to make a bigger determinant in how children are going to respond. And not only that, it's not what you say to their face. It's what you say when they're listening. That sounds weird. You can say something directly to a child, but if they are not engaged in that particular topic, it's in one ear and out the other. What they're usually listening to is what you're saying when you're not paying attention to them, because they're curious and they want to know the secrets. They want to know things behind the scenes. So be very careful. I'm not getting to the point of saying that you have to pretend like you're always on camera, but it's something that you need to be aware of. Children are way more perceptive than you realize, and it's usually not at the time that you consider to be convenient. So with Purple Man, he doesn't have to worry about what he's telling his daughter to do or telling the other kids, in theory, what they should be doing. It's the fact that they see what he's done and how horrible it is. They're still their own people, and they still get influence from others. As time goes on, the external influences become greater than the parent influence. And if he sowed the seeds literally the wrong way, then he shouldn't be surprised that he ended up with a result that he didn't expect. Once again, that is not always a negative, but it is a potential consequence. And how he decides to handle that when people are of adult age, that's up to him. So far, well, in comics, it really didn't go well, but for each of us, we're going to end up on some level of this spectrum where our parents can end up being our best friends or our worst enemies. I can't guarantee that it's going to be one way or the other, but I'm saying your best odds are with some of the tips that have been mentioned so far.
Yeah. Again, I've referenced our friends Anna and Bonnie over at Freudian Sips podcast, and they just did a whole series on Erik Erikson and the various psychosocial stages of development, and the episode that they had about childhood and basically the, I guess, there's two stages, basically like 6 through teenagers, very much ties in with that, and the whole notion of children realizing that their peers start to out-influence what their parents do. But you still have to, as you said, sow the seeds in the beginning, and children will watch what you do more than listen to what you say. And so you have to be consistent and you have to be vigilant. It is not easy. No one ever said parenting was easy. And I thankfully am not at that point yet. My son is 3 months old, so we still say and do pretty much whatever it is around him because he can't really pick up on things. I'm not saying that we're leading this lascivious lifestyle in front of the child. My point is just that, we are focused primarily on him and not less so with how we're presenting our relationship, my wife and I, to him. But the time is going to come very, very soon when that's going to really start to become a focus, and just making sure that we have to remain consistent. And it's going to require a ton of mental bandwidth, and it's going to be exhausting, and it's going to be harrowing. My sister has a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and it is difficult to have to be mindful of that all the time, to require that sort of cognizance and self-awareness all the time. But the end result is so worth it that, to my sister's credit, she and my brother-in-law feel that it's worth the difficulty and going through all of that. So, but that's more of just like a side tangent. The next question Ruby has is more of just a straightforward compare and contrast with the TV version. And I know this isn't something that we do often, but Ruby wants it, Ruby gets it. Right. So let's compare and contrast
I'll let you lead on this because I'm really interested in this, because I'll be honest, I haven't had as much of a chance. I'm very familiar with the TV version more than the comic version. So I'm interested in your take on this.
I mean, I did my research on the comics.
Okay.
And it was difficult because the Marvel Unlimited app really doesn't list Purple Man as a character in that many issues. So my knowledge of him is more tangential and through the zeitgeist, but I would say at least from a general overall character perspective, and this again goes to more of the history of the character. Okay. The characterization is really not all that incredibly dissimilar. If you really want to compare and contrast, I think you would need to read Alias and then watch Jessica Jones and read the Bendis Gaydos comic that the television show was ultimately based on. Okay. And I have read a good amount of that because that is, I don't think it's available on Marvel Unlimited because of the fact that it's basically a max print and it's for adults only. And so Marvel Unlimited is not really keen. Although they do have the current run of Jessica Jones on there, and that is also considered an adult comic. Yeah. But I wasn't able to, at least I had some difficulty finding. Maybe they changed it since the last time I checked. But I did read Alias a while ago, and that one, I would say for season 1, because again, contrasting Jessica Jones and Alias, the first season is largely based around that. I would say it gets into a lot of the same ideas. I would say that the television show Killgrave, for one thing, he has a much more different backstory because he's in the show. He's Kevin Thompson, and he's experimented on by his parents, and so I think that carries a lot of it. And I would say that in the comics, he's much less charismatic.
I was gonna say basically the way I would. You may have to bleep this out, but the best way I can say, he's a smooth mofo. Okay.
I don't have to censor that. You didn't actually swear.
Well, I ended up censoring myself at the last moment.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that comes to the way that David Tennant plays the character, and he did such an incredible job with it. But again, back to the compare and contrast, I would say that the TV Killgrave is a lot more smooth, and the TV Killgrave has the moments of fleeting flirtation with heroism and goodness that the comics really don't get into. Okay. And there's the episode where Jessica thinks that she can finally convince Killgrave to start doing some good. Right. And he actually... I know
exactly which one you're talking about.
He does, in fact, help a couple people. Right. And he gets enamored with the idea of being good. But to Killgrave, and again, this is this is a TV show, he's only interested in being good or doing good insofar as it curries him favor with Jessica. Right. That is ultimately all
you like he cares that, huh? You really like that. All right, cool.
So you like it when I do this? Okay. Yeah. I could do this then. I could be this here. I could be this hero guy. I can do this. Right. Whereas the comics isn't really that concerned with it. He's more of the utilitarian. He's more interested in Jessica. He's fascinated by her. That is very similar. But he's much more interested in just getting Jessica to do for him, because in the comics, much like in the TV show, but particularly in the comics, it's all what can you do for me right now? And then as soon as I no longer need you, I'm done with you.
I'm not sure if it's the mediums themselves versus a direct difference with what I'm about to say, but in the show, I can tell that Killgrave likes what he does, as opposed to in the comics, Killgrave is acceptable of the results of what's happening. There is a significant difference in emotion, in my opinion, from what I see versus the little. I'll be honest, the little I read. I didn't read that much of the comics, so I'll admit if I'm wrong about that, then please correct me. But like I said, I'm not sure that was intentional. Sometimes there are just things that come across in a live medium that can't be done in ink and color, on paper. So I don't know if you have that observation or if that's just me.
I don't think you're wrong. And I do think, again, a lot of it is due to the nature of the medium that you can express those emotions clearly. And this is not to say that all television is more emotional than comics and that comics are flat and lifeless. Certainly, a lot of that is dependent upon the artist as well as the writer being able to craft that story. And we've seen we had an interview with Jeremy Whitley a couple of weeks ago that The Unstoppable Wasp has some incredibly heart-tugging moments in it, and you are able to get that emotion. My point is that those kind of emotional connections aren't all the time or aren't as prevalent as they are in a live action medium like film or television. And it's a little easier because of the fluidity and because you're literally dealing with 3 dimensions, that it is more easily relatable to those types of characters and those types of situations. So that's where I would say some of the differences come in. But I would agree that David Tennant, Killgrave, does really revel in the joy of what it is that he does, and you really see it in his face. And again, a lot of that comes down to David Tennant's performance, but I also think that some of it is just the writing, that they write him as a more hedonistic character than not to say that the comics Killgrave isn't hedonistic, but I think it's just more of a utilitarian idea with the comics versus the TV show, where it's really about, it's almost sexual for him in a way. And I'm not just saying that because he does obviously sexually assault Jessica and a number of women, but it's that carnal pleasure that he derives from the control of being able to do and say whatever it is that he wants to have the control over people.
You've been that character. You haven't been Killgrave, but you've been that guy. You've been that guy that gets off on the pain he inflicts.
Yes, I have. I am your dentist. Yes, for those of you that don't get it, I was Orange Scrivello DDS in a high school production of Little Shop of Horrors, which is one of my favorite roles that I've ever played.
Which is exactly what came to mind when I first thought of Killgrave, thinking of this question. I could see that because I have seen it. That's the way it's portrayed in front of me, as opposed to often in comics or any written medium, even with pictures. You are free to make certain interpretations even when it's written down for you. So for whatever reason, in my own mind, and I'm not trying to portray this for everyone, in my own mind, he comes across much more flat in the comics than he does as a TV character. That's all I was getting at.
Well, again, whether that's art or the writing, I do think there is the potential for a fantastic storyline and arc with this character. Well, he's dead now, but
that matters.
Yeah, I know, like that matters. But my point is, just because of the nature of his power set, he really could potentially become the most dangerous person on the planet. Someone who can convince anyone who hears him to do anything that he wants them to. And he has total control over their mind, and not in a telepathic way, just literally you are incapable of not following his commands. That is some scary stuff. And I think that also is why the TV version was as effective of a villain as he was, but that is rooted in the nature of the storyline that and the comics, that the idea that we could be manipulated outside of our control to do whatever it is that someone else tells us to do. And if they don't have anything less than our best interests in mind, we lose literally our free will. And the notion of that, particularly in a Judeo-Christian society that we live in, the notion of losing free will and the whole idea of, I mean, if you really want to get into the religious aspect of it, the whole notion that God gives us the free will to do and say, live the life the way that we want, the notion that that could be taken away from us. And again, not even just religion, the fact that the very nation, the United States, was founded on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that whole notion of freedoms, and then to have that freedom taken away from us. Killgrave is scary in the notion of that power set. And I think that's what makes him such an appealing character. That's what's made him such an enduring character. And that's why he made such a compelling storyline for the Alias comic, as well as Jessica Jones season 1. And he gets the little bit of pop up in season 2. But it speaks to that inherent fear in us of having that freedom taken away.
Well, now that you've made sure that I've had nightmares for tonight.
moving on to question number 3, which is, do you think Killgrave could ever be capable of a normal interaction with people?
We're going to touch on this in the skit, but I think I could still tie this to what we can understand in real life. What does that mean when we say normal interaction? Because there's the implicit statement that when one person talks to another person, that there's going to be a give and take. One person is always talking, the other person is always listening, and at some point it will switch off back and forth based on the stimulus that they receive. But is that really true? We're not in that type of bubble. There's always something influencing, for example, what I say to you and what you say to me. In this case, you are my friend. We already have established that I have a reason to care about what you say and vice versa. Therefore, it will continue to build upon itself unless there's something so outlandish and wrong that we would have to dissociate from one another for whatever reason. But also positions of power, which is way more relevant to Killgrave, and influence. That's what we do every single day. You don't talk to your boss the same way that you talk to your coworker. You don't talk to your spouse the same way that you talk to the clerk at the store when you're buying a sandwich. So Killgrave, unfortunately, has something that he would have to be cognizant of every waking moment, that anything he says is going to yield a direct result by the other person. I can't imagine that type of responsibility all the time. Just something as simple as, like, wow, I really wish I could get that from that tree. And the next thing you know, the person next to you is climbing up the tree like, oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. Just the unintended consequences are just as powerful. So I'm not saying that he has to have the exact same conversations that you or I would have, but I do think he could be in an environment where the things that he is saying are not just purely his will. We've seen plenty of characters that have the ability to manipulate others through telepathy, or through brute physical intimidation. After all, if I have a gun to your head and tell you to do something, there's a decent chance that you'll do it even if you don't want to. I don't need a power for that. So would we say that's an abnormal interaction? It's normal for the circumstance, but similarly, when's the last time you told your boss off? Please tell me you never told your boss off. Please tell me you never told your boss off.
I mean, in life, in all my years of working,
Oh,
I've
boy.
been employed in some capacity for over 20 years. Have I ever? I did have that one interesting story about the large computer retailer whose name I won't mention, but whose name rhymes with Womp Flew S-Way.
But you didn't tell your boss off. You did something that got your boss angry at you. There's a difference there.
Yeah, but it was the way that I did it. I basically told them off. But I digress.
No, it's not. You think you digress. What I'm getting at is any interaction is a normal interaction as long as it was one that you initiated and you expected a certain range of responses that you consider to be acceptable. So Killgrave saying hello to someone and someone saying hello back, that's fine. That's a normal interaction. He may have wanted someone to say hello to him back, but that still was likely to happen regardless of whether or not he wanted it in the first place. This is getting meta, I admit it. But that type of question yields that type of response. Because the range of responses and interactions with people in general include emotions that we don't have on a regular basis. If I'm angry because of something that happened to me 3 or 4 hours ago, and someone says, "How's your day going?" We've all been there. What's your typical response? I'll tell you mine. You don't want to know. Or, Why am I doing that? Have I lost my mind? Have I actually developed a psychotic episode where I cannot say words? Of course not. But the point is, I had a stimulus long before any of the events leading to the current interaction happened, and it's influencing what's going on in the moment. And hopefully that person takes that cue and recognizes, wow, that must have been a bad event, or that person is having a bad day, and therefore I'm going to respond differently than if that person was having an average day or a great day. So that's a normal interaction, even if it was an abnormal circumstance. Killgrave literally lives in nothing but abnormal circumstances. So, in a strange, very confined definition, he can have quote-unquote normal interactions, but I don't know what to define as the normal circumstance where it'll happen. Sorry.
That's a very fair and I think accurate response to Ruby's question. I think her inquiry was really focused on the notion is Killgrave capable of having regular interactions with people where he's not trying to constantly influence people to do things for him, because he has lived his life being able to get anything that he wants. He can convince anyone to do anything for him, whether it benefits him or not, simply by the whim of whatever fleeting thought is crossing through his brain at that particular moment. And we saw that in the television show on a couple of occasions, that he did it to troll people. And that's why I said that the TV version really derived a carnal pleasure from it, because anything I want, I can convince you to do. Even if it's not for me, just knowing that I have that power and just the arbitrary exertion of that power, I think excites him. And so therefore, not being able to influence someone, and that's why in the show, spoiler alert, when Jessica is no longer under his control, that's why he's so intrigued by it, because now he can't force her to do what it is that he wants. So now he has to compete with her on a real, quote unquote, level. And that's what makes it difficult, because he can't influence her, but he still has power over everyone else. And so he uses that power to manipulate everyone else to eventually get Jessica. If he can't directly exert the pheromones over her, he'll get her. Okay, I can't tell you to go here, but I can make it so that this is your only conceivable path.
Yep.
And I think Ruby's point was, is there ever going to be a situation where he says, I'll let you do what you want?
I think, to answer that more directly, I think the possibility would be that he ends up having an extinguishing event. What I mean by that is the pleasure, the joy that he gets from the responses of people doing whatever it is that he wants becomes boring. If it ever gets to that point, it may not. If it does, then he's going to be in a no man's land. Completely fair game. No idea what to do or how to respond, in which case it leaves the opportunity open for quote unquote normal interactions. But I'm not exactly sure what that would take, because especially in the show, there's just so many varieties of circumstances that can come about, even with that level of power, that I don't know. I can't picture that character getting tired of it. So maybe ultimately not, but I'd still think that there are circumstances that would come up just purely by random chance. Not to mention with the types of people that he ends up interacting with in the first place. In other words, yes, for the sake of explanation of powers, you get to see lower level things, but you're going to be dealing, if it's a major character, supervillain or whatever, they're going to be dealing with superheroes, with other people that have similar, if not powers and abilities, at least similar influence, where he doesn't always have the upper hand one way or another. So it may still be a manipulation of a manipulation. Oh boy, we're getting meta. But
we must go deeper.
I still would consider that normal under the circumstances.
Okay. That's very well stated. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into the treatment.
Do you love movies and psychology?
Do you want to know what it would be like if Batman was in your therapy office?
Listen to our podcast, Popcorn Psychology. 3 therapists dissect blockbuster movies, available everywhere you find podcasts.
Are you going to be in Chicago July 13th for the True Crime Podcast Festival, but feel like one day just isn't quite enough? Do you feel like the best way to grasp the intricacies of the criminal justice system are with inappropriate language and alcohol? If so, you're in luck. The night before the festival, on July 12th, at the Arrogant Frog on West Fullerton, at 7 p.m., there's going to be a collaboration event between Getting Off Podcast and Ignorance Was Bliss. Get tickets and information at IWBpodcast/live show.
And we're back. So now getting into treatment in universe. Obviously, I think your first thing is you're going to have to neutralize his powers.
Yeah.
In some fashion. And it's shown that it can be done. You medicate him and you put him in a sealed room.
Yep, that's exactly it. You already hit it. That's it. The problem is going to be similar to what we were just talking about in terms of interactions, because it's a guarantee that his go-to is try and manipulate me. Just make me do things. And I don't think he would give it up that easily. I think he would just try again and again and again and again and again. And in which case, I would probably have to find a way to utilize medication not just to neutralize the pheromones, but more than likely, and this sounds a little strange, but get him into a more suggestive state. I would need to make him a bit more passive and accepting of what other people have to say.
Get him drunk.
I'd like to think a little more civil than that. Get him high.
Okay, where are they?
No. Oh, God. Let me clarify. People. As I've said many, many times, just say no to most drugs.
You have said that before.
All right. Here's what I'm referring to, though. See, and because I feel like it's necessary to talk about this in a more serious level, I'm going to pull something that's out of universe and pull it into universe. So, especially now, we have done way more research on things that used to be taboo to study and outright banned by the government to study. So, examples include ketamine, psilocybin, marijuana, things that we're coming to recognize have a greater place in society as potential medicinal benefits. Ketamine, especially for depression, psilocybin for anxiety, marijuana for everything that has been approved by the government before the research. I'm sorry, but that's true. I'm not trying to be a downer on marijuana itself. It's well studied in terms of seizure disorders for children, cannabinoid oils, okay? So there's plenty of things to research about it. But the point is, with someone like Purple Man, where clearly there's a hormonal factor to all of this, I would be willing to look outside the box and say, I want to provide you with something that is going to allow you to have a different mindset than you have ever had before. It's not to get high. It is to make sure that you're receptive to what I'm saying without the immediate inhibition and blocking. Because when you have always been in control of everything, the idea that someone is temporarily taking that from you can be terrifying.
I just want to open up your mind, man. Just let it be free. Just open up your third eye. You just got to let go. Well, I was going to say, I don't know. I mean, yes, it can be terrifying. It can also be liberating.
Well, clearly the whole point of this is to look at the positives. And this is not something, although I'm saying it's new from the medical field standpoint, being used at regimented doses. Native Americans have been doing vision quests for centuries. Ayahuasca is another one in the Central and South American regions that's been around for the longest time. And they recognized even then that they shouldn't be using this by themselves and should have a well-established, usually elderly only because of the years of experience necessary, a shaman to guide them through what they were doing or what they were experiencing while they were under the influence. So...
Don't get high alone.
Okay. What I'm getting at with all of this is the world is adapting, the world is changing. Someone like Killgrave already has this at their disposal. It's his own body doing it. I just want to flip that around. That's all I'm saying. And I would hope that in that process, one, I would make sure I'm not trying to abuse that myself in terms of the power struggle. I'm not trying to make him atone for all of the things that he's done. I'm simply trying to help him understand that there may be a different way that he could either use his powers for a benefit or even temper his use of powers so that, as it's already been discussed ad nauseum, he could have more quote unquote normal interactions with people. So,
okay,
that's where I'd go.
So now how much of that out of universe then? Because, and again, we say this every once in a while, we deal with a character whose power set really renders a real world analog to be difficult to say. I don't know.
I got it though.
Okay.
Because I'm that kind of guy.
That's why you're damn good.
I deal with this every day because I have to deal with patients on a regular basis in a crisis setting that are putting their best foot forward. You would never know what just happened a few hours ago. You would never know about themselves, about their families, about the things that they destroyed, about whatever substances they used, about how they interacted with the police, about the things that they said about meeting with me because they've met me before, the threats, all of it. You would never know it. You would think that I was their best friend by the way they carry themselves during an evaluation with me. So my point is, pardon the language, to see through the bullshit. It's my job on a regular basis to match up what I'm seeing in front of me versus what I know as background information and putting two and two together to make sure I get a clear picture of what's happening. So I'm willing to acknowledge that when people are trying to manipulate a situation for their favor, usually to leave the emergency room or to get out of the hospital, that is a typical expected human response. But at the same time, that doesn't make it the safe response. That doesn't make it the healthy response. What I will acknowledge to that person is, I understand what you're saying and how frustrating this whole thing must be. And I'm glad that you're willing to demonstrate for a short period of time that you're able to have a civil conversation with me. But I cannot ignore X, Y, and Z. And therefore, with the information we have, I'm sorry that this is not going the way you planned, but I have to make a decision for you to go into the hospital. And then magically that veil seems to melt within, I'd say, 0.3 seconds. So, no one has Killgrave powers using pheromones to try and control what I'm going to do. But people will use the devil out of charm, out of grace, out of flattery, out of just simply saying, nothing's happened here. Everything's been totally fine. Ask your staff. I haven't done a single thing. And yet, even in those instances, when I ask the staff, they point out, oh, you're right. They haven't done a single thing to us. They sure as heck slammed the phone pretty hard after they got off the phone making threats to their family member. So it's fascinating to see all of this happen in real life.
Nothing to see here.
It's fascinating. It's something that I don't take pleasure in. I don't want people to suffer, and I don't want people to have to feel like they put on a facade. But I do admit that I enjoy the detective work of finding out what's behind the veil. And that's my goal out of universe. I want to make sure that if a person is doing things just to control a situation where they think they have everyone wrapped around their finger, I have to let them know that, one, that's a false premise, and two, if that's really the way that you're going to approach everything, it's going to be a hard road. It's going to be very difficult. It's probably going to be a lot longer than they anticipate, meaning They think it works in the short term, and they may even get out of the hospital because they did it with enough people that everyone agrees, okay, this person doesn't meet criteria to be hospitalized. But I'll ask that question when they come back a week later. It seemed like everything was going so well. What happened? Because, as I've said, I may have said this in the second or third episode, history may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. So, my main goal is to make sure that if people want a better future for themselves, that we keep the rhyming to a minimum. I don't want them to be a good hip-hop artist.
You don't want to deal with a crazy freestyler. Okay. I don't remember when you said that, but I know I've heard it before.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, you managed to escape Luthor last week. Let's see what happens when we get the Purple Man on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Mr. Killgrave. I'm Dr. Issues.
Kill yourself.
I'm afraid your suggestions won't work. You've been medicated and placed in a sealed room so your pheromones have no effect.
Ram your face into the glass repeatedly.
I don't know what it's going to take to convince you that you have no control over me.
Jump out the window.
Are we done?
Fine issues, the doctor. Do enlighten me on how you plan to fix me.
I'm not trying to fix anyone unless you think you're broken, and I don't think you believe that for a moment. How are your children?
Those ingrates don't know what they've been given. They should be thanking me for giving them such amazing power, and instead they fritter away playing at being a hero. I have such goals for them. If only they'd work with me.
Even for a utilitarian, that's a long way to go.
People are tools, Doctor, if you'll pardon the pun. Everything in this life is a tool to be used for a purpose and then discarded when it's no longer useful. An individual is no different than a screwdriver. You want to talk utilitarian? Let's go all the way.
So you have no connection to your tools?
Oh, I can appreciate usefulness. A Swiss Army knife is far more desirable than a single-use utensil. But you wouldn't keep a broken can opener just because it looked nice, would you?
When was the last time you spoke to Kara?
She was supposed to be my greatest creation. I could have made her into something amazing, something even greater than I. Such a thing were possible. Instead, she runs around with Canadians trying to undo my legacy. It's pathetic and frankly insulting.
And your other children, the 5?
They're young, they're children. They'll come around once they grow and mature and understand what they're capable of. I blame that damn noxious Daredevil. If I ever find out who he is, I'll make him pay.
Sounds like you want to fix your broken tools. Why not just find new ones?
Do you have any idea how many women I've had to select to breed to get those children? You can't just walk up to any random female on the street to pass along a gift like this. No, the selection process is everything. You know what people think you struggle picking a mate. Imagine what I have to go through. And the children are tools, yes, but they're also investments. You don't just throw away an investment if you don't have to.
Sunken cost fallacy.
No, please, that's hardly applicable here.
Let's talk about Jessica.
Slit your wrists.
I told you that won't work.
Worth a shot.
You seem awfully reticent to discuss her.
She confounds me. I finally find someone worthy of my attention and power. I finally find an equal, and she betrays me. You have no idea what that feels like.
I've been heartbroken before.
Come on, our situations are not even remotely comparable. You're just a regular person. I'm me.
Well, clearly modesty comes as part of a power set. I've actually noticed that same haughty flair with Jessica herself. She wasn't too keen on my style either.
Oh, so you've had the pleasure as well. Then you're in one piece. She must have liked you to let you walk away intact.
I certainly won't divulge details, but not everything left intact. Do I have to have the same level of concern with you, even in a protected environment?
Well, that depends. Are you going to let me out of here?
Nope.
Then I'd be very afraid for your safety if I ever escape, or if my dosage doesn't take, or if there's even the slightest crack in this wall, or the seal on this room comes even remotely undone. You see, Doctor, you require hypervigilance just to keep me at bay, while I can merely exist and get what I want. I think even you would acknowledge this puts me at a clear advantage.
Is that the same way you feel about Jessica, given the fact that you manipulated her? I mean, therefore, she still has significant ill will towards you with a combination of her own powers and allies that would stop at nothing to make every waking moment miserable for you. That's an interesting projection.
Oh, I like this. You're trying to make me afraid of what those caped heroes could do to me, as if I hadn't already faced them and defeated them several times over. There's nothing they can say or do that would change what's happened. You, however, you're new. And I like a new toy. So let's stop talking about Jessica, who's not here, and let's discuss you.
You realize that's the exact opposite point of this session, right?
Why do what's been done when I can do it my way? Don't you get tired of always talking about other people, asking them about their concerns, their issues? What's going on in your head?
I don't know why I'm telling you this, but, I'm tired. I've been down this path so many times. You're not changing. Nobody is. I get threats all the time. Paperwork's considered more vital than my personal interactions. Haven't met my goals. I barely tolerate myself, and I isolate to the point of being a hermit sometimes. My sleep pattern's broken. I repeat mistakes more than ever. I won't lie. I've actually thought about this, and I've had plenty of intricate ways I've never told anyone. If I told anyone, I'd get committed myself. I mean, it would be clean. Pretty complex, though, because I'd make sure it looks like an accident and it doesn't involve anyone else.
Yes,
And then I stop. Like always. I know what that road leads to. I'm turning over my cards before I get a full hand. That's not fair. Life's never fair. But it's all I have. Honestly, it's all I need. I didn't choose it. It chose me. That's something special. Maybe not for anyone else, but it doesn't have to be. Then I add in all the other people that made it special, and I recognize that my sleep does get a little better once in a while. I do something right in a blue moon. I've made people laugh and cry in a good way. I'm farther ahead than what I thought was possible when I was a little kid dreaming of being a doctor. And when I'm done talking to you, one of those people I made laugh and cry and smile is going to be right there with me. He went through something and he didn't let me down. So I have to return the favor. If you have anything else to say, tell it to someone who cares less, I guess, because I actually care too much for how awkward that sounds.
Grab the guard's gun, place the barrel in your mouth, and pull the trigger.
I told you it doesn't work.
I know it won't work now, but when I get out, that's the last thing you'll hear before it all ends. I want you to remember that when you see your family, when you go to work, when you go to sleep at night and wake up in the morning. That's how it ends for you, Doctor. I'll make sure of that.
Despite the way my face looks right now, you've had a greater influence on me than you realize. In your honor, I'm going to go home and a nice big glass of purple Kool-Aid. All right.
You okay there?
I'm actually better than I've ever been.
Okay.
And part of that is because of you.
I appreciate that. In all sincerity, I thank you. I don't know what else to say. You know that I love you, and yeah. I know our listeners have heard, our longtime listeners have heard Doc and I go back and forth for many episodes now on the bromance here, and just how important we are to each other.
Yeah, but that's the first time I think I've ever actually acknowledged in a public setting the fact that I have thought of those types of things, discussed those types of things, went so far during high school to say "Ready to Die" more as an acknowledgement that that death is inevitable and life is potentially fleeting. Never actually thought of attempting anything despite intricacies, more like writing for the sake of writing itself. And yet, the fact that times like that would happen and they would get so real, it scared me. And then finding out later on what you went through, that was above and beyond anything I ever expected, even though this is my profession. So this is my public acknowledgement for the first time at that level, I think. So, like I said, I'm grateful that I was able to do that with someone like you, because I know, as anybody that is familiar with this podcast knows, Anthony is the lifeblood of this thing in more ways than one. So
stop.
Hey.
I appreciate it. Listen, this is a public good. I do this. I feel that we do this in service of something greater than ourselves. And this just happens to be the medium in which we do it. And I think, if nothing else, as part of doing this podcast, that I have learned about so many more people and other podcasters that have similar aspirations or similar mindsets, whether it's Popcorn Psych, Freudian Sips, Pop Psych 101, all the various psychology and psychiatry podcasts and all the mental health advocates that we've encountered over the last year plus on this journey, I think is really a testament to how important it is and how far we still have to go.
You're absolutely right.
So this went a little heavier than I thought it was initially going to be, but as we always say, we don't write everything out, we don't plan everything out, and we just let the show organically go where it does, and we're grateful to be along for the ride. So next episode, our 50th, speaking of how long we've been doing this, 50 episodes. That's a lot. That is a massive milestone. And so we are going to be celebrating that with a mailbag. It's not going to be focused on any particular character, arc, storyline, etc. It's going to be open to you, the listeners, to ask questions. Do you have a question about a character that we've covered that you felt we didn't address a particular thing enough? Is there a character that we haven't covered yet that you want to know about, or you just have a quick aside? Is there something about Doc or myself that you want to ask us about who we are, what we do outside of the podcast, etc.? You want to go personal, you want to go professional, whatever. We're open for anything. So get us those questions, whether it's through our Facebook page, our Instagram, our Twitter. Everything is at Capes on the Couch. You want to send us an email, it's capesonthecouch@gmail.com. You can subscribe to our Patreon. Thank you to everybody who's been watching us. We recorded the last 2 episodes while we were live streaming. So thank you to everybody who watched this. If you want to check out more of that and more of our exclusive content, you can go to patreon.com/capesonthecouch for that. You can find us on Podcoin. Now we are still, I believe, as of the release of this episode, we still should be finishing up our run as a bonus podcast where you can get additional Podcoins. And if you sign up for Podcoin, please insert the bonus keyword capes, and you will get some free additional Podcoins that you can then use towards transferring for a gift card or to donate to charity. And I think that's about it on that end. Doc, anything you want to add before we close out?
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who's willing to indulge in 2 guys talking about comic books and mental health.
Absolutely. That's all we do, and that's all we are. So thank you very much for Doc Issues. I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.